Isla had always been a woman of great ambition. In a society where marriages were the foundation of one's value, she had built a promising career in intergalactic diplomacy. She had the intelligence, the charm, and the determination that many envied. But in a world where personal connections defined everything, there was one thing that Isla lacked: a husband. It wasn't that she hadn't tried. She had been betrothed twice, but each time her fiancés had either left her or turned their backs on her for reasons she would never fully understand. Some said it was because she was too focused on her work, too driven to succeed. Others claimed that the pressure of living up to society's ideals had been too much for her partners to handle. No matter the reason, the result was the same. Isla was unmarried, and in a society that placed so much importance on marriage, that made her an outcast. Her life had been a series of victories and setbacks. As one of the leading diplomats of the Intergalactic Council, Isla had negotiated peace treaties and brokered trade deals between different star systems. Her skills in diplomacy were unmatched. But despite all of this, she could never shake the feeling that something was missing. The people around her, the ones she considered friends, often whispered about her behind her back. They called her the lonely one and the career-driven failure. They didn't understand her drive, her need to prove that she could succeed on her own terms. To them, a woman without a husband was incomplete, a failure in the eyes of society. Isla had tried to ignore the whispers. She had focused on her work, pushing herself further into her role. But the pressure was wearing her down. Every time she attended a council meeting or a gala, the looks were the same, pity mixed with judgment. The women around her, all married and with families, looked at her as if she were a strange, almost tragic figure. They smiled at her, but it wasn't the smile of a true friend. It was the smile of someone who pitied her. The turning point came one evening, after a particularly difficult council meeting. Isla had just finished negotiating a crucial trade deal with a hostile alien race when she overheard a conversation between two of her colleagues. They were discussing her, and though they didn't know she was listening, their words stung her to her core. One of them said, "She's brilliant, yes, but she'll never be taken seriously until she has a husband." "A woman without a partner doesn't belong in this world," the other agreed, adding, "She's already been passed over twice. I don't think anyone will ever want her now." The words echoed in Isla's mind as she left the meeting. She had been told that she was too independent, too strong for any man to handle, and now those same words were being used against her. She couldn't help but feel the weight of their judgment. She had achieved so much, yet none of it seemed to matter because she didn't have a husband. It was as if her entire identity had been reduced to her marital status. For days Ayla wrestled with the thoughts that had been planted in her mind. She tried to push them away, but they clung to her like a shadow. The loneliness that had once been a quiet companion in her life had now become a loud, oppressive force. She began to wonder if there was any truth to what they said. Maybe it was time for her to give up on her career and focus on finding a husband. Maybe that was the key to her happiness, her fulfillment. But Isla was not a woman who would give in easily. She had always been determined to carve her own path, to prove that she could succeed without relying on anyone. And yet, as time passed, she found herself coming to a difficult realization. Maybe she couldn't do it alone anymore. Maybe, just maybe, she needed help. In a moment of desperation, she decided to take a bold step. She sought out someone she had once considered beneath her, someone who, despite his ordinary background, had shown a kind of quiet strength and resilience. His name was Adam. He was a man of no particular rank or status, but there was something about him that had always intrigued her. He had been a minor diplomat, working under Isla on a few projects, and though he lacked the prestige of her colleagues, he had always been reliable, calm, and steady. He was the kind of person who could see beyond appearances and didn't care for the power games that others played. Isla had never thought of him in any romantic way, but now, in her desperate state, she saw him as someone who could help her. Isla knew that her request would be unconventional, but it was the only solution she could think of. She needed to find a way to show the world that she was not a failure, that she was worthy of respect and honor, and she needed someone to help her do that. She needed Adam to pretend to be her husband. At first, Isla wasn't sure how to approach him. She hesitated, unsure of what he would think of such a strange request. She had never really confided in him before, and they had only worked together in a professional capacity. But desperation pushed her forward, and she finally made the decision to speak with him. She found him one evening, sitting in a quiet corner of the council building, reading through a report. His calm demeanor and focused expression always put her at ease, and for a moment she felt a small sense of comfort. "Ada, I need your help," Isla said, her voice steady but with a hint of urgency. Adam looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a calm curiosity. "What's going on, Isla?" Isla took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. This was the moment that would change everything. I need you to pretend to be my husband. There was a brief silence as Adam processed her words. He didn't look shocked or confused. Instead, he simply raised an eyebrow, waiting for an explanation. Isla continued, her words coming out in a rush. I know it's strange, but I need to prove to everyone that I'm not a failure. If I can show them that I'm married, that I have someone by my side, they'll stop looking down on me. They'll stop thinking that I'm incomplete. Adam leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. You don't need to prove anything to them, he said quietly. Isla shook her head, a bitter smile on her lips. I do. In this world, if you're a woman without a husband, you might as well not exist. I need this, Adam. Please. I can't do this alone. For a moment, Adam said nothing, simply looking at her. Isla could feel the weight of his gaze, the quiet scrutiny that seemed to peel away her layers of professionalism, revealing the vulnerability she had hidden for so long. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. All right, he said, his voice calm and steady. I'll help you, but only because I know how much this means to you. Isla felt a rush of relief wash over her. She had no idea how this would all play out, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Adam's agreement didn't just give her a solution. It gave her a chance to finally take control of her own story. She wasn't going to let society define her anymore. She was going to prove that she could rise above the shame and build the future she wanted, with or without the approval of others. As she looked at Adam, she realized that this was the beginning of something far bigger than either of them could have anticipated. Their journey together would not just be about pretending to be husband and wife. It would be about fighting for a future where neither of them had to live in the shadow of other people's expectations. The decision had been made. Isla's plan to convince the world that she was not a failure, that she could stand proudly alongside a husband, was now in motion. But what Isla didn't anticipate was just how complicated it would become. At first, pretending to be married seemed like a simple solution, but as the days passed, it became clear that their fake relationship would lead them into a world much larger and far more dangerous than either of them could have imagined. Adam, her unlikely partner in this ruse, had agreed to help without hesitation. His calm, unwavering support gave Isla a sense of reassurance that she hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't ask questions or push her for details. He simply agreed and stepped into a role that neither of them had expected to play. They were to attend galas, diplomatic meetings, and social events together, all while pretending to be a happily married couple. It was awkward at first. Isla had never been comfortable with deceit, and pretending to be something she was not made her feel exposed and vulnerable. They began their journey in a small, quiet town on the outskirts of the galaxy, a place where Isla's absence from social circles had gone unnoticed for a while. It was here that she hoped to test her plan before taking it to the larger, more dangerous systems. As they entered the town's main hall, Adam walked by her side, looking every bit the part of a devoted husband. He wore a formal suit tailored to perfection, with a quiet confidence that Isla had never seen before. His presence gave her a sense of security, even if she couldn't fully shake the discomfort of their charade. The event they were attending was a gathering of local diplomats and community leaders, a gathering where Isla had once been the star. Now, she was nothing more than a distant memory. As she entered the room, eyes turned toward her, and the whispers began. Some faces lit up in recognition, others frowned in confusion. But the moment they saw Adam at her side, the whispers quieted. Isla noticed the shift immediately. It was as though the very act of being married gave her a new sense of legitimacy. For the first time in weeks, the whispers of pity and judgment seemed to die down. As the evening wore on, Isla and Adam mingled with the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and sharing a few quiet words with some of the most influential people in the room. Isla felt herself slipping into the role of a married woman. She laughed and smiled with Adam, though her heart still ached with the knowledge that it was all a lie. Adam played his part flawlessly, never breaking character, always at her side with a smile that put everyone at ease. But Isla noticed something strange about him. There was a glint in his eye, a kind of quiet determination that she hadn't seen before. It was as if, despite the role he was playing, he was something more than just an actor in a play. When the evening ended, Isla found herself exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained. The act of pretending, of putting on a mask for everyone to see, was harder than she had expected. Adam, however, seemed unaffected. He was calm, collected, and never once appeared to struggle with the deception. As they made their way back to their small quarters in the town, Isla couldn't help but wonder what was going on inside his mind. She had always seen him as quiet and reserved, but now she saw a different side to him, a side that suggested he might have his own motivations, his own reasons for agreeing to help her. That night, after they had both retired to their rooms, Ayla couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts of the future and the consequences of their actions. She had asked Adam for help, and he had given it freely. But what was he getting in return? She had no idea what was driving him, but she knew she couldn't let herself get too comfortable. This was only the beginning, and the road ahead would only get more complicated. The next morning, Ayla woke early, unable to shake the unease that had settled in her chest. She dressed quickly and went for a walk outside to clear her head. The town was quiet in the early hours, the streets empty except for a few early risers preparing for the day. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light over the town. It was peaceful, almost serene, but Ayla couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She had taken the first step toward regaining her dignity, but she had no idea where it would lead her. As she walked, she found herself at the edge of the town, where the fields stretched out for miles. It was here that she saw Adam, standing by himself staring out at the horizon. He hadn't noticed her approach, and for a moment, Ayla simply watched him. There was something about him that intrigued her, something she couldn't quite understand. He wasn't just the quiet man who had agreed to pretend to be her husband. There was a strength in him that she hadn't noticed before. Adam turned as he heard her footsteps behind him, his expression unreadable. "Ayla," he said softly, his voice calm as always. "I didn't expect to see you out here." Ayla paused for a moment, unsure of what to say. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, her voice uncertain. "I've been thinking about everything, about what we're doing." He nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I understand. This isn't easy, but it's what you wanted, isn't it?" Ayla felt a pang of guilt. "Yes. It's what I wanted, but it's harder than I thought it would be. Pretending to be something I'm not, I never realized how much pressure it would put on me. How much it would hurt." Adam was silent for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. "You don't have to pretend to be something you're not. You're already enough as you are." His words took Ayla by surprise. She had never expected Adam to say something like that. He had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, never drawing attention to himself. But now, as she looked at him, she saw something deeper, a quiet wisdom, a sense of understanding that she hadn't expected. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "But I don't know how to stop pretending. I've built my life on this. I've always felt like I had to prove myself to others, to show that I'm worth something." Adam stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You already proved everything when you became who you are. You don't need to wear a mask to gain respect. People will see you for who you truly are, not for the roles you play." Ayla's heart swelled with emotion. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that before. It was as if Adam saw her in a way no one else did. He wasn't judging her, he wasn't pitying her. He was simply seeing her. For the first time in a long time, Ayla felt a sense of peace. Maybe she didn't need to pretend anymore. Maybe, just maybe, she could be herself and still find the respect she longed for. But even as the peacefulness settled over her, Ayla knew that the journey was far from over. They had only just begun their charade, and the challenges that lay ahead were still unknown. There was still the question of why Adam had agreed to help her. There was still the looming presence of the society that scorned her. There was still the fear that she might never truly escape the weight of the expectations placed upon her. But for now, Ayla allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something more. She wasn't alone. She had Adam by her side, and together they would face whatever came next. Ayla had always known that appearances mattered in the world she lived in, but now, more than ever, she realized how much power a simple title could hold. They had been playing their roles as husband and wife for weeks now, and the weight of their falsehoods was starting to settle heavily on her shoulders. Yet, as much as she hated the deceit, the results were undeniable. The moment they had stepped into the first major council event together, something had changed in the way people looked at her. There were no longer dismissive whispers behind her back. They no longer saw her as an isolated failure, but as a woman with value, a woman who had found her place in the world, albeit in a way that felt wrong to her. It was supposed to be a short-term solution, a way to regain her standing, a chance to prove that she was not incomplete simply because she did not have a husband. But now, with every passing day, she began to wonder if she was losing more than she was gaining. Her feelings for Adam, which she had tried so hard to keep at bay, were growing. What had started as a simple arrangement to deceive the world had become something far more complicated. Adam, too, seemed to change. He was still the quiet, reliable man who had agreed to help her, but lately there was something different about him. He was more confident now, almost as if this act of pretending to be her husband was allowing him to discover a side of himself that had long been hidden. They had begun to share more than just polite words. They had begun to talk about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Isla found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone else. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the pretense became too much to bear, and Isla found herself wondering how much longer she could keep up the act. But Adam never faltered. He played his role as if it were second nature to him. He never once questioned her motives, never once asked her why she needed to do this. Instead, he simply stood by her, offering her quiet support and understanding when she needed it most. They were in a new city now, a sprawling metropolis that had long been a hub for intergalactic trade and politics. The streets were lined with towering skyscrapers that reached toward the stars, their glass facades reflecting the city lights like a million diamonds. Isla felt out of place here, surrounded by the wealth and power of those who had everything they could ever want. She had once dreamed of being part of this world, of walking among the stars and having her voice heard on the most important matters. But now it felt empty. The weight of her own insecurities made the city feel colder than it ever had before. The gala they were attending tonight was the most important event yet. It was a gathering of some of the most powerful leaders in the galaxy, each one eager to make deals that would shape the future of intergalactic relations. Isla had been invited because of her position within the diplomatic council, but it was clear that her presence had been more for show than for her expertise. People didn't see her as the brilliant diplomat she was. They saw her as a woman who had finally managed to snag a husband, as if that made her somehow worthy of respect. As they arrived at the venue, Ayla felt the familiar surge of nerves in her stomach. She had been here before, but tonight felt different. The stakes were higher now. Adam was by her side, his calm presence a quiet anchor in the midst of her turmoil. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back as they walked into the grand hall, and for a moment she allowed herself to lean into it, to forget the weight of her own expectations and simply feel the security of his touch. The room was filled with glittering lights and the hum of conversation as people from every corner of the galaxy mingled and made deals. Isla could see the power players talking with each other, their faces calm and controlled as they negotiated and made their moves. She was supposed to be one of them, but tonight she felt like an outsider. Her position in the room was nothing more than a reflection of Adam's presence. She had never felt more exposed. As they moved through the crowd, Isla noticed the looks. Some people greeted her warmly, their smiles wide and polite. Others, however, looked at her with pity in their eyes, as if they knew she was still the woman without a true place in this world. She tried to ignore it, but it was hard. The judgment was subtle, hidden behind smiles and polite words, but it was there all the same. And then there was the most difficult part, looking at the women in the room who had what she wanted. They wore their husbands like trophies, their smiles wide and assured, their lives perfectly curated. Isla didn't know how to fit into that world. Adam, as always, was by her side. He seemed to be moving through the crowd with ease, exchanging words with those they encountered as if he belonged here just as much as anyone else. His charm was effortless, and Isla couldn't help but notice how he seemed to blend into this world, something she could never do no matter how hard she tried. The fact that he didn't belong here either somehow made it worse. He was playing the part of the loving husband, while she was playing the part of the content wife, and yet neither of them was truly happy. Isla excused herself from the conversation she had been having with a group of diplomats, retreating into the quieter corners of the hall. She needed a moment alone, away from the polished masks and empty smiles that filled the room. As she moved toward the terrace, where the cool night air offered a brief respite from the crowd, she was met by the last person she expected to see. Standing by the railing looking out at the city lights below was a figure she hadn't seen in years. Darian, the man who had once been the center of her life. Darian had been her fiancé many years ago, back when she had still believed that a marriage could be a union of love and mutual respect. But he had left her, leaving behind nothing but the shattered pieces of what she had thought would be her future. His sudden reappearance took Isla completely by surprise, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Her heart pounded in her chest as memories flooded back. The laughter, the arguments, the way he had promised her everything and then disappeared without a trace. "Isla," Darian said, his voice soft but filled with a kind of nostalgia that she didn't quite understand. "I didn't expect to see you here." Isla's mind raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steady but sharp. "You left me without a word. After everything, you think you can just show up again?" Darian sighed, turning to face her. His eyes were tired, as if years of regret had weighed down on him. "I never meant to hurt you, Isla. I made a mistake, but I never stopped thinking about you." The words were a cold comfort, and Isla felt the anger rise within her. She had spent so long moving past him, building a life without him, and now here he was, expecting to pick up where they had left off. "You don't get to do that," she said, her voice trembling with the force of her emotions. "You don't get to come back and pretend that nothing happened. You left me when I needed you the most." Darian took a step forward, his expression softening. "Isla, I'm sorry. I was afraid. I didn't know how to handle everything. I was young, I made mistakes, but I've changed. I've spent years regretting leaving you. I just want a chance to make it right." Isla stared at him for a long moment, feeling a mix of anger and sadness welling up inside her. She had loved him once, with all her heart, but now she realized that the love she had felt was gone. She had moved on, had become stronger without him. This was the last thing she needed, the man who had once broken her heart, coming back to complicate her life even further. "I don't need you to make anything right, Darian," she said, her voice low but filled with conviction. "I don't need you, and I never will. You had your chance and you threw it away." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Darian's face was a mixture of regret and longing, but Isla knew that this was her moment to finally let go. She wasn't the woman who had been left behind anymore. She was stronger than that. She had her own path to walk, and she wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Darian, distract her from it. Without another word, Isla turned and walked back into the crowd, leaving Darian standing alone on the terrace. She felt a strange sense of relief, a weight lifting from her shoulders as she rejoined Adam. He didn't ask her what had happened. He simply stood beside her, a steady presence that reminded her that she wasn't alone in this. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with Adam by her side, Ayla was ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed the gala felt like a blur. Isla couldn't shake the encounter with Darian, the man who had once been her everything. His sudden appearance had brought up emotions she thought she had buried long ago. She had told him that she didn't need him, that she had moved on, but deep down she knew that the past still had a hold on her. She had worked so hard to build a life without him, yet his words lingered in her mind like a shadow she couldn't escape. She had chosen Adam to play the part of her husband, but was he really the man she wanted by her side? Could she ever truly move on from her past? She pushed the thoughts away, focusing instead on the task at hand. They had come to this city for a reason. This was where the most important negotiations of her career were set to take place. The future of intergalactic trade depended on the success of this summit, and Isla knew that she had to be at her best. She couldn't afford to let the past distract her. Adam, as always, was by her side. He had become more than just her pretend husband. In the weeks since their first public appearance together, their partnership had grown. There was an ease between them now, a silent understanding that didn't need words. When they were together, Isla felt stronger, more capable. He never questioned her decisions, never second-guessed her plans. He simply supported her in the way that she needed. The summit was in full swing, and Ayla was doing what she did best, negotiating, persuading, and working the room. But the entire time, a part of her mind couldn't help but drift back to Darian. Every time she saw Adam, every time they spoke, she thought about what it would mean if their fake marriage became something real. Adam was a good man. He was steady and reliable, everything she had ever wanted in a partner. And yet every time she tried to imagine a future with him, her thoughts wandered back to Darian. It wasn't just about love. Isla had always known that her career and her independence mattered more than anything else. She had built herself up from nothing, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. But Darian had been a part of her life when she had felt the most alive, when she had believed in love and the future they would share. Now she had to remind herself that it wasn't love she needed, it was respect. It was a sense of worth that wasn't defined by anyone else's opinion. The summit had been a success. Isla had brokered deals with several influential leaders, and her position within the council had never been stronger. But as the final meeting concluded, Isla couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had achieved everything she had set out to do, and yet there was an emptiness that lingered. She had fought so hard for her career, for the recognition and respect she deserved, but in the end it wasn't enough. It wasn't until later that evening, as they were walking back to their quarters, that Adam spoke. "You did it," he said quietly, his voice full of pride. "You made a difference today." Isla smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I did," she replied, her voice distant. "But I'm not sure it matters anymore." Adam glanced at her, concern in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I've done everything I set out to do," Isla said, her voice low. "But it still doesn't feel right. I've spent so long fighting for a place in this world, trying to prove myself, and now that I have it, I don't know what's left." Adam stopped walking and turned to face her. "You're not alone in this, Isla," he said firmly. "You don't have to do it all by yourself." Isla looked at him, her heart heavy with emotions she hadn't fully allowed herself to feel. "But I've always been alone. I've always had to do everything on my own, because if I don't, I'll be seen as weak. I thought that if I could just prove myself, if I could just show everyone that I was strong, that I was enough, then I would be happy. But now that I've done it, I'm not so sure." Adam's expression softened, and he reached out to touch her arm. "You've done more than anyone could ever expect. You've built yourself up from nothing. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, least of all to yourself." Isla felt the weight of his words sink in, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel the comfort of someone else's support. It wasn't about being strong anymore. It wasn't about proving herself. It was about letting go of the fear that had always held her back and trusting that she didn't have to carry the burden alone. As the days passed, Isla continued to wrestle with her feelings. She had built her entire identity around the idea of being self-sufficient, but now she was beginning to understand that there was more to life than just success and recognition. There was a deeper, quieter sense of peace that came from allowing herself to be vulnerable, from allowing someone else to help carry the weight of the world. She realized that her relationship with Adam, though it had started as a ruse, had become something far more important. He wasn't just playing the part of a husband. He had become her partner in every sense of the word. He had been there for her when no one else had, offering his support without question, without hesitation, and she had come to realize that she had been wrong to think that she didn't need anyone. Adam had become her anchor, the steady presence that helped her stay grounded when everything else felt uncertain. And as she looked at him now, standing by her side with his quiet strength, she knew that he was the one person she could always rely on. They didn't need to pretend anymore. The bond they had formed was real, and it was something that neither of them could deny. But even as Isla began to understand the depth of her feelings for Adam, there was still a part of her that couldn't let go of the past. Darian's words still echoed in her mind, the promises he had made and the love they had shared. She had never stopped caring about him, not completely. But she knew now that the past was just that, the past. And it was time to move forward. It wasn't easy. Moving on from Darian, from the life she had once imagined for herself, was harder than she had ever thought possible. But Isla was learning that true strength didn't come from being alone. It came from knowing when to lean on others, from understanding that love and support were not weaknesses, but the very things that made her stronger. As the sun set over the city, casting a warm golden light over the skyline, Isla turned to Adam. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. "For everything. For being here when I needed you." Adam smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "I'm not going anywhere, Isla. We're in this together." Isla felt a sense of peace settle over her, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that everything would be okay. She had found her place in the world, not through the approval of others, but through the strength of the connections she had forged, the relationships she had built. And with Adam by her side, she knew that no matter what the future held, she would never have to face it alone.